This is Jordan Butler, host of Head Over Heels. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hi everybody, this is Baxter Colburn from Public House Media. From all of us here at PHM, we'd like to thank you for your support and wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
This is Emily, host of Beauties and Headcanons here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come and check out my show, Beauties and Headcanons, where we talk about nerdy theories, games, TV shows, books, movies, you name it. We're here to talk nerdy to you. A new show comes out every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
The latest headlines.
If they go out and wipe the floor with the Texans, I might buy in.
The insightful interviews.
Whitney McIntosh, SB Nation.
I was more impressed with Giancarlo, especially when you consider Aaron Judge's all-star squad.
The hottest takes.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley had a great game against Iowa, but he hasn't done much.
Can all be found on Press Row. Here's your host.
It's clearly time for a change. It's only a matter of time before it happens.
Christian Heimel.
You're on Press Row, everybody. Broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network. Taking the show on the road this week. We are down in Orlando, Florida, sunny Orlando, Florida, for the Major League Baseball Winter Meetings. Down here, the heartbeat of baseball in the offseason. Plenty of deals going down. GMs upstairs in the hotel, making deals with free agents, trades, all that stuff being discussed in private. And some of the bigger ones you guys are going to hear about right here on Press Row. Had a chance to speak with Steve Phillips, former Mets general manager and now host of The Leading Spot on MLB Network's Sirius XM radio channel, as well as John Flaherty, former Major League catcher and now analyst for the YES Network. You're going to hear from them their thoughts on the Giancarlo Stanton trade, the Yankees sending Chase Headley back to San Diego, as well as some other things. And when you guys do hear these interviews, they were pre-recorded here. When you do hear them, you will understand, at least we hope, the noise that you hear in the background. It is a very busy place, but we want to make sure that some of the other details that we get to you guys can actually hear. So you will hear a lot of background noise when we get to speaking with John Flaherty and, of course, Steve Phillips. But want to touch on some of the bigger news in sports. Of course, the Giancarlo Stanton trade obviously headlining things here in Orlando, which makes a pretty big lineup in New York. The Bronx Bombers are back, most certainly. And now you have Aaron Judge batting third, Stanton potentially batting third, or Judge batting fourth, Gary Sanchez batting fifth, Greg Bird is in that lineup. The trade of Chase Headley makes things interesting. It's a potential now for the Yankees to possibly go out and re-sign Todd Frazier if they want. Frazier wants a multi-year deal. The Yankees aren't willing to commit to that, so it'll be interesting to see who budges on there. And then the other big story that kind of got overshadowed more than anything else with the Stanton trade is the fact that Shohei Ohtani, the Japanese two-way player, pitcher, first baseman, designated hitter, signing with the Angels, which was a little bit surprising. Late last week, you saw the Marlins trade D. Gordon to the Seattle Mariners, and the Mariners were able to pick up some extra international signing bonus money, which to many people made them the front runner to get Ohtani. And it was one of the teams that he thought about. He wanted to go to the Mariners, and it kind of made sense considering their history with Japanese players, of course, Ichiro Suzuki. But he goes ahead and signs with the Angels, and it was kind of a surprise to a lot of people. Maybe even more surprising was the news late last night that he had a partial UCL tear, which is one of those things that can cause Tommy John surgery, and he was given an injection earlier this year. So now it just makes things really, really interesting with Ohtani, considering will he be healthy to start the 2018 season? Does this have any ramifications on the deal that he signs with the Angels? But the Angels now become a very interesting team in that American League West with the Mariners, obviously the reigning world champions, the Houston Astros, and the Texas Rangers. So some interesting moves going on there. Those are the two bigger ones. Some other smaller deals that have gone around here in the Major League Baseball Winter Meetings down in Orlando. A couple of teams are still looking at possibly getting Marcell Ozuna. It seems as though the Cardinals are the front runner there to get the Marlins player, Christian Yelich. Derek Jeter wasting no time cleaning house in Miami. Now with the Marlins doing a lot of work down there. So we'll see what happens. Ozuna and, of course, Yelich are probably the next two biggest names, but the question becomes which free agents get signed. J.D. Martinez, Eric Hosmer's still out there. Jake Arrieta is still out there as well as Greg Holland. So you wonder, Wade Davis. So you wonder just how many of these guys are going to get signed this week. It's been relatively quiet. Monday was the busiest day of the week by far, with Giancarlo Stanton being introduced as a Yankee. Derek Jeter, the CEO of the Marlins, not being here in Orlando made things interesting, but the president of baseball operations, Mike Hill, he answered some questions. You heard Giancarlo in his press conference say how excited he was to be in New York and to play for that team, but it'll be interesting to see exactly what they're able to do. The Marlins now, if they do end up trading, they've already traded D. Gordon. Marcell Ozuna seems to be next on that list, and then Christian Yelich. Ozuna seems to be the one the Marlins are pushing simply because there's less control over him. He's only got 2 years left on his contract, but Yelich has another 4, so it'll be interesting to see which teams are going to bite on those trades. Some other potential trades that are kind of interesting, and we'll get to them here now in a second, is the fact that Danny Salazar of the Indians, one of their top pitchers, it's been talked about that he could be going to Chicago, to the Cubs. They've had some conversations there, but nothing too crazy. It'll be interesting to see what happens, considering that the Indians, with Salazar now potentially on the move, the Indians have very big depth in their pitching rotation. Cleffinger, obviously, this year in 2017 was huge. Josh Tomlin, Trevor Bauer, Carrasco, Corey Kluber. That's a lot of guys when you include Danny Salazar in there. Salazar seems to be the odd man out considering the injury in 2016. So wouldn't be surprised at all to see him on the move at some point here during the offseason. But the biggest question, I think, more than anything else, becomes what do the Red Sox do, if anything, now that Stanton has officially been introduced as a Yankee? And that's been the question here around Orlando is, what will the Red Sox do? What will Dave Dombrowski do? Dave Dombrowski, though, came out the other day and told the media that he wasn't planning on doing anything until January, which is kind of interesting. Talking to some folks here this week, every single person, former GMs, they have all said the same thing. You don't want to make a reaction based on what your biggest rival does. But at the same time, the Red Sox, a team that had to hang on to win the American League East in a year that they should have run away with it, with the Yankees making the moves that they did, they now have to find a way to get back into it and actually do something to make them maybe not a favorite in the division, but at least a contender in the division and potentially for the pennant as well. A lot of other things to talk about here on Press Roll. Get away from the baseball for just a moment. We'll come back to it. Of course, we're going to answer some of your questions. You guys have been asking a lot of questions about here in the winter meetings, and we'll get to those later on in the show. But big week in the NFL as well. A lot of interesting things that kind of jumbled around the standings, jumbled around the playoff picture in the NFL. I got to be honest, I've been one of those guys who is kind of written off the Pittsburgh Steelers. Wasn't really that impressed with them, considering I didn't think they really could do much on the road, but being able to get a nice victory again this week. They beat Baltimore, of course, and they go on and win the division. And now with New England losing to Miami on Monday night, which is a real shocker to a lot of people, they hold the lead currently for that number 1 seed. But this weekend, the big one is New England and Pittsburgh, obviously. So the Patriots can very easily come away and take care of business and get back into that top spot for home field advantage in the playoffs. A couple other scores, and I told you guys this, I've been saying it for a while. The Falcons control their own destiny. I know I don't think they're going to go deep into the playoffs, but with their victory over New Orleans 20-17 this past weekend, they make things pretty interesting now, just a game behind the Saints. The Panthers with a victory as well over Minnesota at home. That makes it kind of fun to watch. Considering now you've got the Panthers who are tied with New Orleans for the top of that NFC South. Atlanta right there, a game behind them at 8-5. But again, we've talked about this a couple different times, folks. The Falcons control their own destiny pretty much, considering who they have the rest of the way. 3 games to end out the season against divisional rivals, the Buccaneers, this Sunday night, and then on the road at the Saints, home against the Panthers. The Falcons have a chance to win this division still in these final 3 weeks if they can go ahead and take care of business. Minnesota losing makes it interesting just because they're trying to fight for that home field advantage. It may get a little bit easier now with the unfortunate injury of Carson Wentz. And if you watch that game between Philadelphia and the Rams, that was a huge win for Philly, bouncing back after the loss to Seattle, in which they really looked overmatched. But they came back and defeated the Rams 43-35. A really exciting game. You saw that fast-paced, high-octane offense where the Eagles just go out there and are able to win the NFC East. 4 touchdowns for Wentz. Jay Ajayi with another solid day, 78 rushing yards. But the injury to Carson Wentz is what makes this really interesting. And I wouldn't be too concerned if you're an Eagles fan. Nick Foles, a little bit wiser now, a little bit older, maybe a little bit more comfortable in this system. And we're not talking about a rookie quarterback here who hasn't been around. We're talking about a guy who just a couple of years ago was 12-4 as a starter. Very, very good for the Eagles a few years back. So really interesting to see what happens here. I got to be honest, as we look at the playoff picture in the NFL, the thing that really kind of surprises me and is not being talked about enough is just how close Jacksonville is. The Jaguars, even with Blake Bortles as their quarterback, and Blake has been getting a lot of flack this year, the Jaguars have a chance this weekend when they host the Texans. They have a shot to potentially clinch the division if Tennessee loses this weekend as well. But right now, Jacksonville is really impressing me here, and I'm not going to say I'm all in on them, but they are very, very exciting to watch. And if that defense is just so fast, and if they can do anything here, you're going to see a pretty exciting team in the playoffs. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when they go on the road as you look at Jacksonville's schedule the rest of the way. The Jags, with obviously the Texans at home this week. They go to San Francisco next week, and then to the Titans on New Year's Eve to round out the regular season. But the Jags with that win over Seattle, really impressive. However, you look at them on the road so far this year, and it hasn't been great. Loss on the road to Arizona. They had to squeak one out over Cleveland. Big win, obviously, over the Colts on the road. Big win at the Steelers, and those are probably the ones that you kind of hang your hat on there. But other than that, I mean, I'm starting to get behind the Jaguars here, and it'll be fun to watch what happens with them. Jacksonville, an interesting squad here heading down the stretch, again at 9-4 and leading the AFC South. But they've got the Texans this weekend, and then obviously Tennessee at the end of the year. So interesting week in the NFL. It's going to be a pretty fun one this weekend. Again, you got some big games coming up. Obviously, the biggest one most likely is going to be Pittsburgh and New England. That could be a battle for the home field advantage and potentially an AFC championship preview. So don't sleep on the Jags. Don't sleep on the Falcons at all here as we enter the final 3 weeks of the NFL's regular season. We'll take a break, and when we come back, you're going to hear my conversation with Steve Phillips, former Mets general manager and now the host of the leading spot on MLB Network Radio, Sirius XM. And then after that, you're going to hear from John Flaherty, the former Major League catcher and now YES Network Analyst. We'll talk a lot about Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees, what that means for New York, what that means for the Red Sox. You're going to hear an interesting take as well from Steve Phillips here in just a little bit about Shohei Ohtani and his decision to go and play for the Angels. So hope you guys enjoy that. Take a listen to these two conversations that we had down here. We're in Orlando at the Baseball Winter Meetings. We'll be back with Steve Phillips, John Flaherty, your questions. It's all coming up just a little bit on Press Row.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast-Public House Media. Or find us on Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. You can also email the program, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Live here at the Winter Meetings in Orlando. Chris Michael on press row, and now with former Major League executive and MLB Network Radio host Steve Phillips.
Oh, certainly, my pleasure.
And real quick, kind of take us through what these meetings are like. You've been here as an executive and now as a member of the media. What are these things like for those guys making all the decisions?
Well, just behind closed doors, there's a lot going on upstairs in the suites of the hotel. Every team gets a suite, and usually the general manager and assistant general managers have bedrooms on either side of the suite. And then starting about 7 o'clock in the morning, the crew shows up. All the special assistants, the scouts, the manager, coaches possibly, owners possibly, where they get in the room, talk about what they're going to do for the day, line up meetings every hour on the hour. So at 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, they'll have meetings with different teams. Some of them are home meetings, where the other team comes to your suite. Some of them are road meetings, where they go to the other suite. One of the complaints is that the suites aren't that big in this hotel, so they don't often let all of the people who you want in the room stay in the room. So you have to have a smaller traveling party to go to somebody to meet. But you meet, talk, discuss, see where there's an area to fit. Further discussions that have been laid out at the general manager's meetings or phone calls coming into this, and see if there's grounds to make a deal. Then you might take a break for lunch to kind of regroup, debrief on all the meetings in the morning, schedule more meetings in the afternoon. You might work in something with an agent in the afternoon with some free agents that you're talking to. In the meantime, you got to take some time to call the owner and bring the owner up to speed with everything going on, and so that they have some understanding of what's happening. And so it's a pretty busy day for sure.
We've seen a lot of deals go down at the Winter Meetings, and we actually just saw Giancarlo Stanton walk by us here just recently introduced as a news member of the New York Yankees. Take us through kind of that deal in your mind with a former GM who's seen it from both sides, that kind of deal for the Marlins and the Yankees.
Well, for the Marlins, obviously, the ownership team, they recognized they bought an asset that was operating at a loss. And as businessmen looked at it, said the only way to really affect the kind of change we want is to cut the payroll, cut the expenses. So they're doing that now. It's not the most popular move, certainly in South Florida, but they're doing what they think they have to do to get their business plan in line with the baseball plan. For the Yankees, this was somewhat of a sneak attack, where they realized, put themselves in a position, they were the only game in town that the Dodgers, the Cubs, the Astros really weren't in. And Brian Cashman was able to work out a deal to where he gets Stanton at a $22 million AAV. He moves off $8.57 million AAV of Starlin Castro. So effectively, $14+ million is what Stanton's costing them in the deal. And they came in with about $32 million to spend under the luxury tax. So with creative accounting, Brian Cashman dramatically improved the team. Has room to still make some additions to the pitching staff, and has set this club up for the next decade.
Obviously, it's tough to really kind of predict how things will play out in 2018, but that bat in that stadium, that division, kind of forecast what we expect to see from Giancarlo in the Yankee uniform.
Well, Yankees had the second most runs scored last year, 858, about 40 less than did the Astros. They hit 241 home runs, the most in Major League Baseball, and they added a guy with 59 homers, drove in 100, scored 100. So, you suspect they're going to score well over 900 runs next year. That offensive production will put them in a position to, I think, rather dramatically challenge the Astros, the Indians, the Red Sox, and others for the best team in the American League. And even if they don't dramatically improve their starting pitching, they've created enough margin for error with the offensive upgrade that it should be just fine, especially with the bullpen they have. So I think they've propelled themselves into a position to be a team to beat the American League.
We're speaking with Steve Phillips, former Major League Baseball executive and MLB Network Radio host here at the Winter Meetings in Orlando. And there's still a lot to be said, a lot of free agents out there, obviously, but how much is Stanton's signing kind of force the Red Sox fan here to go out and maybe get another competitive bat?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it's the general manager to not want to react and respond to the closest competition. That being said, this wasn't just a move, this was the move. And so adding the national most valuable player, you're competing like the Red Sox are, and the teams already needing power. They're going to have to make a statement here. And so I think Scott Morris is probably looking at his chops and taking him through this. Now, if they want to make a move, possibly to go get Marcelo Zuna from the Marlins, it might be in play. But I honestly think they need more of the DH type where he can play some left field Martinez, but DH as well. He seems to be the better fit.
Stanton signing, or trade kind of took away a little from Shohei Ohtani signing. It kind of seems to surprise people considering the Mariners made to get that international signing money. What do you notice, and what have you seen from this young man that can help the Angels in that AL West?
Well, he's such an odd. The way he thinks doesn't match some of the ways that we might think. I try to apply my baseball experience to his decision making, and we didn't agree. And so he is different, right? And I think that for him, it was about relationship with John Anderson going up, and that was important to him. And I think that when you look at it, he's an ace of the pitchers. He's a big left-handed bat. He desperately needs to line up. They're going to have some challenges finding him in bats with Albert Pujols becoming more of a DH now than before. But that being said, it's a great acquisition for the Angels. And you're right, it was a bit of a surprise. I didn't think he'd go to a National League team, but I thought from among the American League teams, the Angels would be third, and they ended up choosing him.
If you could try to predict maybe what you think the next biggest game of all two comments you were waiting for at the winter meeting, they actually haven't recorded the meeting.
Yeah, I think that Marcelo Ozuna and Christian Yelich potential trade market might slow down J.D. Martinez a little bit. So I suspect that we may be looking at some starting pitch. We'll see some relievers, I think, start to move a little as well. Brian Shaw's got a 3-year deal out there. He's hoping to get a 4th year. He might not get it, but he'll probably end up taking the deal soon. And I think that we'll probably see Arrieta and Darvish really start to heat up a little bit right now. I suspect Darvish to move before Arrieta.
Last thing I want to ask you about here against Steve Phillips, former Major League executive, as well as now the host on MLB Network Radio. Grew up in the Detroit, Michigan area. They were brought out earlier on Monday, Alan Trammell and Jack Morris making the Hall of Fame. I saw you had an excellent exchange with Alan earlier, a guy that you probably have a lot of admiration for growing up in that area. Talk about those two finals.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I grew up and watched Alan Trammell and Whitaker come into the Major League together, play together, be the longest serving double play combination to ever play together in Major League Baseball history. Went to so many Jack Morris games and starts as a kid growing up in Detroit. I love how he competed. He went on to do it in Minnesota. He did it in Toronto as well. But I think that it's a big day for those guys to get in. I think they've been overlooked for a long period of time. And now for them to finally get their sort of due recognition, to get it from the committee that included players and executives who I think had a different and more appropriate understanding of their contributions. It's fantastic. And I think to see Al Kaline, another Tiger looking into the camera to Trammell and Jack Morris. I really want to
We're back in a bit after this on Press Row live from the Winter Meetings in Orlando.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Back on Press Row here in Orlando at the Winter Meetings, Major League Baseball. I'm now speaking with one of probably my favorite people to talk baseball with, and for those of you who know me, that's tough to say considering the team that he now played for, of course, and now obviously an analyst with the YES Network and former Major League catcher John Flaherty here. John, you and I have been to the same amount of Winter Meetings, I think, which is a little strange to say.
Yes, 2 of them, right? And this year I think seems a lot more crazy than last year. I don't know if it's the location, but for me it's fun to kind of get behind the scenes a little bit. You get great access, but also to see so many people that I've known in this game for such a long time. It's a fun week.
What's it like being a player where Winter Meetings come up and you don't know if it's going to be a new contract, if it's going to be a trade for you, to now see that happening for some of these players like a Giancarlo Stanton or a Shohei Ohtani, where the Winter Meetings kind of can make or break the next 10 years of their career?
Yeah, the one thing that players want and crave is stability, and you know that when a bunch of general managers get in the same building, stability goes out the window, right, with trades, free agency, any of those things. So obviously, it's an exciting time in their careers, but these are real people who have real families, and a lot of things change pretty quickly. The Yankee standpoint today, make a trade sending Chase Headley back to San Diego. One of my favorite Yankees to talk to, just a great guy, great family, but you know that they're on a whirlwind right now, so you kind of feel for them, but it's part of the business, as they say.
We're speaking with John Flaherty, former Major League catcher and now YES Network Analyst. And you mentioned, obviously, the trade for Headley, and we were talking before we started recording here that Brian Cashman wheeling and dealing. Mm-hmm. It seems as though last year the Yankees were a team that weren't really supposed to be competing for a playoff spot, and then all of a sudden the trade deadline rolls around and they make a move to be able to go right out and trying to compete for the division. It's amazing, Christian, what a difference a year makes, right? The year before they're getting rid of players, stockpiling their system, and they'll admit it, this happened a lot quicker than anybody thought it would. But this is what the Yankees do when they're in position to win. They go for it. They make the big deals. The trade for Stanton, which I think kind of fell into their lap a little bit. But the Steinbrenner family approves payroll. They put their money back onto the field, into their product. And it's just been an amazing year and a half for Brian Cashman. I think he's had the ability now to really do his job with freedom. And I think everybody around baseball knew he was a good GM, but maybe had a reputation, well, I could be a GM of the Yankees with all that money. But I think now we're seeing really what a genius he is. What's been really impressive is now with the Headley trade, obviously, is there's more space underneath the luxury tax now for the Yankees. You've seen this team, you're with the players, you're in the clubhouse. What else do you think they need to do before opening day gets here? Well, starting pitching, obviously you can never have enough of it. I think they're probably going to look for a solid 2 or 3 on the trade market. Now there's question marks. Headley's gone. Who's going to play third? Is it going to be Gleyber Torres? We thought maybe he would play second. That Castro's gone. So there are some question marks in the infield. Todd Frazier was such a popular Yankee coming over last year. He's a free agent. Is that going to be back in play? There are a lot of things to still talk about, but the one thing that keeps coming up is that luxury tax threshold. Yankees will be underneath that. They're committed to this, and it's kind of fun to see Brian Cashman make some deals to get rid of money, to free up some more money. It's a fun week here for him. It's kind of funny to sit here and see all these trades that Brian Cashman's doing. It's kind of made people forget the fact that in 2018 there's going to be a first-year manager of the New York Yankees in Aaron Boone. How much is he enjoying this? Oh, he's got to be loving it, right? I mean, obviously you get the Yankee job, which is a huge job, and as a rookie manager and all of that stuff, it's going to be fun to watch, see how he progresses. But now he's got some issues on this team. I mean, to be honest, Stanton is great. Stanton was a right fielder. Aaron Judge is a right fielder. It was Rookie of the Year, and so there are some things that have to be worked out. The one thing about Aaron, and you hear it all the time, great communicator, great baseball mind, all of those things are true. He carries himself with a presence and a swagger that's impressive. He'll get the respect of that young team very quickly. But there's going to be some bumps along the way, and part of my job is to be critical of those bumps. So I think he'll make some mistakes early, and I think he'll figure it out awfully quick. Speaking with John Flaherty, former Major League catcher and now analyst for the YES Network, and this move with Stanton obviously put the ball in the Red Sox corner now to try to compete for that division and win another championship or win another title with them. How much pressure does this really put on the Red Sox, not only to get a power bat, but maybe to try to find some pitching that can quiet what looks to be a very big Yankee lineup? It's great when Red Sox Yankees are good, right? And to your point, they will make a move. They will make multiple moves to. It's not a reaction. It's just listen. We want to be on this stage as well. J.D. Martinez is a name you hear. They're in for Hosmer. I think they need a couple of bats. They need some power. They need David Price to come back to where he was earlier in his career. So I don't know about anybody else, but listen, I'm a New York guy, and I played for both franchises. And I think baseball is better when the Red Sox Yankees are good and you have that heated rivalry. And it's not just during the 162 games in the postseason. It's off season, and Dave Dombrowski will make a move, I think, before we leave here, and it'll probably be a very big one. So as we get set to wrap up the winter meetings here over the next couple of days, what's kind of the most fun part for you now? Obviously, this being the second one that you've been to, and you're doing it as an analyst, not necessarily as a player, but what's it like just to be able to be around here and see so much going on? Well, the great thing about the Yankees is that they make these moves, so they make our shows so much easier, right? We have so much to talk about, and they give us great access to their organization, which is fantastic. But for me, it's seeing, guys I haven't seen in a long time, and, a lot of people moving around. To catch up with some of them and find out how their families are doing and make sure everything's okay. You hear a lot of times players talk about the baseball family, and it really is. It's a tight-knit group. So for me, it's a fun 4 or 5 days just to catch up with everybody. John, it's good to see you. Good to see you, Chris. It's John Flaherty, former Major League catcher and analyst for the YES Network. We're back in a bit on Press Row.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast-Public House Media. or find us on Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Back on Press Row, close-up shot here from Orlando. The baseball winter meetings, players meeting with general managers and agents trying to get signed and continue their careers, while general managers meet with one another for a trade and see what they could possibly do. Obviously, the big story so far this weekend has been Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees. A couple of other trades here or there, but nothing too major. Some signings. Drew Smyly has been signed by the Cubs, but he'll miss 2018 with Tommy John surgery. Get to some of your questions here as we close up shop and get ready to say goodbye from sunny Orlando. Brandon in Baltimore. Can the Orioles seriously be considering trading Manny Machado to the New York Yankees? Well, they're listening more than anything else, and from talking to some people, that's kind of been the big shocker this week when we heard about that, simply because they are division rivals. But the Yankees have a truly loaded farm system, and here's the reason why the Orioles would even consider getting rid of Manny Machado. They can't afford him when his contract expires next year. Peter Angelos and that group are not going to spend the money it takes to keep Manny Machado around. He's going to command $15, $18 million a year. He's going to want 4 to 5 years on a contract, and I don't think the Orioles are going to be willing to do that. So they're thinking, try to flip him, get some younger guys, and maybe go into a rebuild process. You got to remember something. This all started 4 or 5 years ago with the Cubs and with the Astros when they started selling out some of their big names to get prospects and get loaded farm systems, and it worked because they won the World Series each of the last 2 years. So it's kind of the trend now. You're going to start seeing more of that. It's why Giancarlo Stanton's been traded by the Marlins. A lot of cap space, or a lot of salary space, and some young guys. That's why you're going to see all these type of players, like Aroldis Chapman, get dealt again potentially. You're going to see Manny Machado probably get moved. I don't think it's going to go to the Yankees. The White Sox seem like more of a reasonable destination, just because to try to rationale to your fan base, if you're the Orioles, that you traded your best player, the future of your franchise, to a divisional rival, would be very, very difficult. So I think the White Sox, Chicago seems like a more logical option for them. They've got a very loaded farm system as well. The question is, what kind of prospects are they going to get back? Will the White Sox take Machado's contract and stuff like that? So I don't think you need to be concerned about Machado going to New York, but the Orioles most certainly are looking to get rid and trade Manny Machado here before we get into 2018. So where he goes is still yet to be determined. We will figure that out at some point very, very soon. Other trades that have been talked about, we mentioned Danny Salazar earlier, but the one that kind of really popped up the other day on Tuesday is the fact that there is considerable talks between the Rangers as well as the Diamondbacks on trading Zach Greinke, which would be pretty interesting to see. We're not sure exactly what is going to happen, but Rangers are definitely talking about that to get Zach Greinke. But we'll see what happens, mainly because Greinke has a no-trade list, and the Rangers are one of them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Sin-Soo Choo also is being discussed as part of that trade heading to Arizona, but he's got 10 teams he can veto a trade to. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But it'll be interesting to see exactly there, because the Diamondbacks aren't looking for a salary dump, so Arizona would probably have to pay a good chunk of Greinke's deal if they are going to unload him. Other than that, it'll be interesting to see what happens. So it could be fun here the rest of this winter. I mean, this is where the winter meetings kind of really kick off the official off season, and where big trades happen, free agents get signed again. The question becomes, as you heard from Steve Phillips, you need to make a move if you're the Red Sox. The question is who? Eric Hosmer's still out there. JD Martinez is still out there. They need a couple of bats. but they could also use some middle relief. So we'll see what happens. Other questions here coming in from you guys. One question on Instagram, and again, you can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. You can find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast Public House Media, or email us pressrowphm@gmail.com. Question on Instagram: are the Pirates looking to do any trades down there? It's interesting. The Pirates have been discussed as a team that was going to be very, very active, but so far we haven't seen much from them. They have made mention that Garrett Cole is not available for trade. So, but we also heard that they were discussing potentially going to the Rangers. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't think Garrett Cole goes anywhere. Andrew McCutchen seems like the likely trade target for most teams who need some help in the outfield. The Pirates are looking to deal him. They've been wanting to, mainly because he's the guy who's going to bring in the most for them. San Francisco is a team that has made inquiries about it, but who knows what you'll see. We all thought that, truth be told, I thought that he would have been traded during the season, but he wasn't. So I don't think there's much talk going on right now with Pittsburgh, other than they may be trying to get some more relief pitching. Who knows? Other than that, we do know that they have been in discussion with possibly trading a couple of different people. Garrett Cole has been the name that a lot of people expected to be traded, but the Rangers have said they are not looking to trade him. So if they do trade anybody, it will be Andrew McCutchen. And then let's see, email here. Eric in Florida wants to know, what do we think of the reaction to the Seattle and Jacksonville game, Michael Bennett diving at the football? Look, here's the thing. This is one of my biggest issues in sports. When you know it's either trying to show up someone or being upset that things didn't go your way. You see it in basketball a lot. Guys throw a temper tantrum. They don't get a foul. Steph Curry's been ejected. They yell at the refs all the time. The NFL actually sent out a memo this week about teams and players to expect repercussions if they make aggressive marks or something to officials. So if you think that what Michael Bennett did wasn't Bush League, diving at the ball or trying to dive at someone's legs when they're taking a kneel down at the end of the game, I mean, I understand that it's a big game. You want to win if you're Seattle. You take pride in not being able to perform effectively and win the game. But to have that happen just shows you the lack of mental fortitude that some of these guys have. Some of these professional athletes have. And it doesn't make anything better when fans get involved. And this is the problem. And this is what I wish would happen. I understand, Jefferson very upset going at the crowd after that beer gets thrown on him, the first one, and then multiple more get thrown at him. It's very hard in that moment to walk away and not do anything. We saw it happen in the Malice at the Palace years ago in Detroit. But it's very hard to not do anything in that instant. When you have that much adrenaline, that much testosterone built up, and something like that happens, it triggers you almost immediately, and it's very hard to reel that back in the same time. That being said, players need to understand that these facilities have so many cameras where they're going to be able to identify and punish the culprits. So you need to try to find a way to walk away, because those fans, as much as there are cameras and as much as there's an ability to find out who they are not going to be publicly reprimanded. They're not going to be known to public so that people can criticize them on Twitter or tell them that they're a terrible person. You as a professional athlete are going to. You're in the spotlight more, so you are going to, whether it's right or wrong, get ridiculed more often on a larger scale. So as much as I would like to see guys like Michael Bennett not do stuff like they did, guys like Jefferson not go into the crowd or towards the crowd, it's very tough to also reel that back in when you have that much adrenaline, that much testosterone after a hard-fought game that you just lost on the road. It's difficult, but it's something that all athletes need to understand, and I don't think they can yet. And it's we as fans who need to understand that these are, as you heard Michael Bennett saying in the post-game locker room, he's a human being. We need to understand that as fans, and we need to be better as fans when we're going there. And when you go to a sporting event, if you see someone doing something like that, you need to speak up, because not saying anything is just as bad as doing something. So it's one of those things that it really kind of tarnishes the game. I mean, you saw it happen with Adam Jones, Baltimore, when they were in Boston. You saw all those things happen. We as fans need to be better so that players don't get put into situations like this. Fans start it, players escalate it, and it's always, it's never the one who starts it. It's always the one who gets caught, and it's usually the second person that gets caught. So we as fans need to be better, and I certainly hope that you guys understand that and understand where these players are coming from. Really appreciate you guys being a part of the show, as always, supporting us here down in Orlando at the Winter Meetings. You guys are what makes this possible, so thanks again. You can always keep track with the show and reach out to us on Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. You can email the show, pressrowphm@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook as well, Press Row Podcast Public House Media. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, and of course, thephmedia.com. We're down here in sunny Orlando. It's time to say goodbye, though. Want to give a big thanks to Steve Phillips, former Mets general manager and now host of The Leading Spot on MLB Network, Sirius XM Radio, as well as John Flaherty, the former Major League catcher and now current YES Network Analyst, for joining us here at the Winter Meetings in Orlando. It's the start of what's going to be an exciting offseason. It usually is in baseball, and I know some of you guys are hoping to hear some more basketball, some more football stuff, some more college football stuff. We'll get back to that next week, but for now, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for the support. We appreciate it, and until next week, I'm Christian Heimel. I'll see you on Press Row.